What's up, my homies, and welcome back to Let's Talk FGO Wanted, the show where we let you know if you want to roll that 5-star. On today's show, we're going to be looking at a long-awaited 5-star SSR Avenger, Marie Antionette Alter. And if this is your first time watching a Wanted video, on the video we talk history, folklore, mechanics, and more. And because this one has been a long time coming in many senses, I get to do some ancient FGO memes. But I have no other qualifiers, so we're going to move straight into the history section up first. Alrighty then. Maria Antonia Josefa Johanna, yes, that's the full name, was born on All Souls Day, which is November 2nd, in 1755, died in 1793, age 37. Also, I picked this specific portrait because I thought it was neat. Mary has a lot of portraits. Anyway, young Maria Antonia was the youngest daughter of Maria Theresa, head of the Habsburg Empire, and Francis I, the Holy Roman Emperor, which meant she was styled an Archduchess. Young Maria was mostly raised in Vienna by the imperial governess, Countess von Brandeis, and spent a lot of time with her older sister, Maria Carolina, future queen of Sicily and Naples. And yes, you may be noticing there are a lot of Marias. At age 7, Maria Antonia met child prodigy Mozart, who was only a couple months younger than her. And during this time, Maria Antonia was studying a variety of subjects. She learned dancing, music, particularly noted to learn harp, flute, and harpsichord. She was commented as having a beautiful singing voice. FGO actually uses that one. But her skill with writing and speaking languages lagged behind. Keep in mind, though, her European aristocracy was like trilingual at this point. So she's being taught German, French, and Italian. I wanted to make a joke about I don't know how good I was doing in English at 7, but no, I was a very, very wordy child. But I wasn't studying 3 languages, so who knows. It is observed by her tutors that this is not because she was unintelligent, but rather she was observed as lazy and frivolous, hard to teach. You know, smart, but not enthusiastic. They did, however, say, tutors and teachers interacting with her on a personal level described her as having a good heart and character. Now, to put an end to the hostilities after the 7 Years' War, Maria Theresa accepted the political marriage of Antonia to the heir, referred to as the Dauphin, of King Louis XV, and in 1770, Maria Antonia was married in proxy to Louis Auguste, and then went to France and had a ceremonial wedding later that year. Upon moving to France, Maria changed her name to the French styling, Marie Antoinette, and she became known as La Dauphine, as the wife of the Dauphin, the heir to the throne. Note that to be considered more appealing to the French court, Maria Antonia underwent a few makeovers. She changed her fashion and hairstylings, her walking patterns, even had her teeth straightened, And Mary attracted a bit of controversy immediately. While there was a ceremonial bedding at her wedding, it's reported that the couple didn't actually consummate for several years, which is, legally and socially tricky. But since Mary and Louis were about 14 and 15 at this time, I can't say I'd want to get freaky with all my French nobles watching either. But you see the tone of certain stylings that surround her, unfortunately. Now, in 1774, Louis XV dies, Louis XVI ascends the throne. This makes Marie Antoinette the Queen Consort of France. Among several other things, Louis immediately gave Marie the Petit Trianon, a chateau on the grounds of Versailles, the massive sprawling palace area. And this immediately gets into some rumors. You see, Mary used the Petit Trianon as her private residence. She entertained her ladies. She lived there as if she basically had no court or social position. Not even the king slept over, and no other gentleman either. They could visit, but did not spend the night. It was a private, intimate residence where she was, in charge of everything. But this privacy fostered rumors. She did make some small renovations, but the rumors and stories spread that she had the chateau redone with gold and diamonds plastered on the walls. Again, starting a long history of questioning her spending habits. Much of this rumor-mongering was done in the libelles, small pamphlets designed to smear a public figure. The name comes from the Latin for small book. Specifically in French, it refers to such scandalous texts now. If you're curious, libelles is not the origin of the word libel, but they come from the same Latin root. They're both from the Latin word for book. Anyway, among many of these rumors, in response to the libelles, Holy Roman Emperor Joseph II, Marie's older brother, stopped by in 1775 to ask why Louis and Mary weren't having any kids, and he found out that apparently the French royals were very bad at sex. reported lack of interest in figuring it out. But he seemed to have managed to help Louis figure it out because their first child, Marie-Thérèse Charlotte, was born in 1778. During this time, after sorting out all that... Sorry, I almost said consummation hoo-ha, but that might be a little too much of an entendre. I'm just gonna leave that one alone and transition to my next script point. Anyway, Mary started to get a little more involved in court politics in this time. She worked in changing court fashions because, in Austria, they had done away with certain stuffy styles of both personal fashion and court manners. And among her other political operations, she asked for France to intercede in the War of Bavarian Succession, and she also started drumming up support for the American Revolution, partially by securing Austrian and Russian support for the League of Armed Neutrality, which was an effort to keep the British out from searching for French contraband in neutral shipping, among other things, and by nominating a Minister of War and a Secretary of the Navy separately, who would aid America in winning. Unfortunately, involvement in the American Revolution was probably more detrimental to the French national debt than any of Mary's rumored gambling or spending. And I do want to say this, by the way. I say rumored gambling and spending. Marie Antoinette did have expensive tastes. She was a trend chaser. We'll talk more about a couple of points where that comes up later historically. But she doesn't seem to have been overly spendy on herself and did numerously, take step backs in, spending. And I didn't find any source of the gambling. That's just what people said. But... yeah, the national debt was not doing good, and again, bailing out America didn't help. And for several reasons, she began to decline in popularity with a variety of social classes. She did actually have some social clout when she came here. During this time, she made several political and diplomatic moves which favored Austria over France, because it was her homeland, and it was perceived as her putting Austria first. And the nobles at court were upset when, in 1782, she promoted her favorite, the Duchess of Polignac, to royal governess, which was unprecedented for her social rank. That's right, they were upset that a duchess was so newly raised up. The Polignac family also did not help Mary's case with spending, but that's kind of their own problem. Now, in 1783, Mary supported the appointment of a new controller of finances and new minister of the royal household after, being asked for input from her struggling husband, Louis the 16th. And they did import highly conservative policies when it came to military officerships, which included a certain amount of noble birth requirement for high-ranking positions and blocked sons of working professionals and recently promoted nobles from the hierarchy. This was actually one of the things which a wide variety of reformers might have a bone to pick with her with. Despite these legitimate grievances in her home policies, the politicians she's supporting at court, the rumor mill was mostly focused on the scandalous and the fantastical. She was the subject of outrage first at the royal court in general, and then more ultimately narrowing down to focus on the queen herself. And in particular, there was a lot of focus on her being a foreigner, bringing in scandalous ways from the Austrian courts, like lesbianism, apparently. Yeah, if you were a man and hung out with Mary, they thought you were banging, and if you were a woman hanging out with Mary, they thought you were banging. I don't know. You can't win with these people. These rumors also encapsulated the birth of her second son, Louis Charles, who was said to be a result of an affair with Swedish courtier Axel von Fersen. This is not true, based on, what correspondence we've recovered from both Fersen and Mary. And Louis Charles' birth dates match up with literally recorded conjugal visits from the king. He and Mary would jot down on the diary, popped over to see Mary, Now, during this time, Mary was, however, still considered a patron of the arts. She sponsored and performed music in theater. She collected books and plays, had a very extensive personal library. She showed an interest in scientific endeavors, such as the continued work on the hot air balloon after witnessing its first test flight. She worked through quite a lot of these things. Unfortunately, one of the arts she sponsored was the play The Marriage of Figaro, which had a very negative depiction of nobility, and was originally banned by the king, but was allowed to go ahead after Mary's approval. And Mozart did adopt this into an opera. But yeah, it's one of those odd cases where you would think that Mary being like, no, this play's very funny, I've been reading it to the court, it should go ahead, even if it does have a bad depiction of nobility. People would, be able to see kind of the self-reflection of that, but no, they didn't like it. Well, they didn't like how nobles appeared in it. In 1785, there was the infamous Affair of the Diamond Necklace. This is important for a couple reasons we'll need later. It's a secret tool. But This was a confidence scheme, a literal scam relating to a necklace for Madame du Barry, the mistress of Louis XV, and several courtiers who were around Mary, which included Count Alessandro Cagliostro. So the actual process of the fact-finding and trials wasn't that damaging to Mary directly. It was, after the fact, later used to slander her for enacting petty revenge on Cardinal Rohan, whom she did not like, and more strikes against her excessive spending, because she was related to the subject of the confidence scheme. The con woman who was pulling off this trick with the fake necklace was supposedly doing it in Mary's name, but it wasn't actually. The funding was through Cardinal Rohan because he was trying to actually impress Mary because he wanted to mend their relationship. But a lot of that got muddled up in the court because of, he said, she said type stuff, and it later got tacked onto Mary's long rap sheet. Now, in 1787, directly, Mary took a more forward role in politics, especially economics, at the request of her husband. He was not having a good time because France was not having a good time. There were already several series of riots about bread and other food shortages and so on. Mary made several moves to try and improve the economy, but they basically didn't have any success. Like, she tried to find new ministers, she tried to go through processes and tried to stimulate the economy, but it wasn't working out. And so she was coined the name Madame Deficit. And again, the rumor mill applied personal slander to her, despite the fact that, again, Mary's personal spending was a drop in the bucket of the French national debt, which was caused as a result of a long series of wars and the failure of the wealthiest classes to prop up the state. The church and the nobles didn't want to give the state back money, so money kept coming out of the state. None of the state money could return to the people. It's a whole thing. That said, not to let Mary get off scot-free, she was known to be very opposed to reform. She dug in her heels about reform pre-revolution several times. Her favorite politicians were very conservative in their stylings. She did ultimately make some concessions to the Third Estate, but she did urge her husband to stand firm against reformers. It's very funny, she didn't seem that interested in the French court, but when we get to this period, she's very much like, but wait a minute, you're the king, and my son's gonna be the next king after you. Maybe we should, stand up for ourselves a little. And she did push for military action against the oncoming revolution. But there were an awful lot of personal attacks in this time that were completely unfounded, including of which, in 1789, Mary was in mourning over the death of her eldest son, Louis Joseph, who died of tuberculosis at age 7. And literally at this time, the Third Estate, now reformed to the National Assembly, was spreading rumors that Mary wanted to bathe in their blood while she was supposed to have been in mourning, and the nation was not. So I can understand how she might be a little miffed. It's one of those things where, like, yes, you are standing against the reform movement. You are backing conservative politicians who are not going to fix the problems in this country. However, that's not what the other side is arguing. They're mostly just trying to make you out to be a terrible person on a personal level. So I, could understand not wanting to reach across from there. From this stage, the revolution begins in full. I don't really want to run over the whole entire affair. It's very complicated and would add a lot to this video that we don't need to get in directly. In the early stages, Mary seemed to be allying herself with the liberal aristocrats who wanted to set up more of a constitutional monarchy. Like, she was opposed to reform, but would do it if it meant losing less, basically. But unfortunately, revolutionary fervor continued due to bread shortages and got more and more extreme. Basically, there was a more moderate position in the revolution, but it was quickly beaten out because people still didn't have anything to eat. The revolution did not immediately solve their problems, so they were still mad, and it keeps kind of spiraling. Mary did, however, stand staunchly with Louis XVI and didn't flee the country when she could have several times, despite the fact that she was in serious danger. Again, the revolutionary government and pundits made her a personal enemy of the revolution in a lot of odd ways. There was an infamous escape attempt from Paris in 1791, but it failed, and again, while the moderates covered for Louis and Mary, the failure damaged much of the support that was left with the royals, because it's not just that she was going to flee to, Austria. It was, we're going to flee to a royalist stronghold. And then, actually, by the way, completely off the cuff, this is not in my notes, but I remembered it. If anybody's looking for cool alternate history stuff, there are rumors that Louis and Mary were going to flee to America. There was apparently a compound built in Pennsylvania, set aside, which would have been for them. So there's a great alt history fiction for you, the French royals in exile in America. Because, hey, guess what? again, Mary and Louis were very instrumental to getting the American Revolution off the ground, and our revolution flowed a little differently than the French one. Now, after this, Mary was involved in several plans and plots to aid her escape, the Carnation Affair being one that failed. She did pit revolutionary factions against each other, and did have some moves to try and pressure to the war with Austria and the other war with the First Coalition, in her sincere hopes that the French revolutionaries would lose and she would be liberated by her homeland. And ultimately, more and more radical revolutionary voices won out. Some of it may be because she dug in her heels about the Ancien regime. Like I said, Mary was staunchly opposed to the loss of power of the throne and the kind of embarrassment that, she and her husband seemed to suffer in the general revolutionary fervor. It's a little hard to tell what happens when, because at this point, we'd already been through, storming of the Bastille and stuff like that. They'd been put under house arrest, thrown out of the palace, arrested again, moved around, And we continue on to the point where, eventually, the monarchy is absolved. Louis was executed in 1793, and the widow Capet, because they were no longer the royals, they were the Capets, was put on trial in October of that year, where she was squarely blamed for much of France's financial debts. She was accused of orchestrating forces against the revolutionaries and conspiring with foreign powers, and found guilty of high treason and executed via guillotine 16 October. The last two are technically true. Like I said, there's not only so much we can hold water for her here. Her last words are reported as, "Pardon me, sir, I did not do it on purpose." I'm not trying to pronounce the French of it. For when she accidentally stepped on the executioner's shoe. And that is the end of that. Some other general history facts. If you don't know, but hopefully you do, the let them eat cake story is well known to be apocryphal. Jean-Jacques Rousseau quoted a great princess for the line, but the timing of that, when he allegedly heard it, and I say allegedly because he could have just made it up, was when Mary was 9 and still in Austria. History has really shifted on Marie Antoinette, which is arguably reflected in FGO. The anti-royalist depiction in the Libelles was the prevailing one for many years, and sometimes continues to this day. Another reason never to play Assassin's Creed Unity. But through recovery of her historical war writings and possession, there is a core that she was seen to be a positive, caring person, very dedicated to her friends and companions, a student of culture, though perhaps a little bit too easily taken with chasing new fads and fashions. And she seems to have valued privacy and simplicity despite tales to the contrary. She doesn't seem to have been the lady to, set up giga orgies at Versailles. It was more like she would have, piano recitals. She would set up theater for herself, and, her and her intimates would read books, mostly plays and novels. I know, weird, wild. She did, as we said, exercise some reactionary conservative policies, but she was used as a scapegoat by both the nobles and revolutionaries alike, so it feels hard to say to be surprised that she stood against revolutionary ideals when they were paired with very personal attacks, including coercing her son to accuse her of incest at her trial. Like I said, it's just, they already had her on the high treason. They decided to go the extra mile, and like I said, they went out of their way to make personal attacks, even though she literally did conspire with foreign governments against the new French government. Again, her own homeland run by her relatives, but still, that's actually true. By the way, to put an end to this story, after her execution, Mary was buried in an unmarked grave, but during the Bourbon Restoration in 1815, she and Louis were exhumed and reinterred in the Basilica of Saint Denis with the rest of the French royals. So, transitioning to lore, the idea of Dark Mary is fucking ancient by FGO standards. It's referenced in our first singularity, Orleans, which was available at launch. Mary, along with Sanson, Mozart, and Dion, are all present in the story, and during a discussion with Jeanne d'Arc about John Jalter's identity, Mary says that she could possess the ability to become a darker version of herself and, seek revenge for the injustices against her family, her children, herself. But as the Saint of France, Mary doesn't think Jeanne could be corrupted the same way, and there is a Shadow Mary who embodies her darker emotions and impulses in her interlude. So, all the way back from the start, basically, we have this moment which is John is oh man, could there be an evil me? Is that something that could happen? Could I be summoned as a dark, twisted version of myself? And Mary's nah, I don't think so. I could be, though. Now, an actual Dark Mary sprite, involving a couple of things, including her Red Riding Hood costume, appears in the Fate Requiem collab board game Apocalypse. This Dark Mary is not actually real. It's an illusion summoned by the dark spirits dwelling in Erise, who are trying to guilt her over plot stuff in her home story that I don't understand very well because I can't read Fate Requiem in English. Because fuck me, I guess. But, actual Mary is in that story, regular writer Mary, and she mentions that the image they create is true to life. Like, I think at one point Ares is just like, that was fake. That wouldn't happen at all. And Mary's like, no, that seemed pretty she may have been an illusion, but she seemed pretty legit. The dress is the one she wore to her execution, for instance, is what it's based on. And in the Moon Goddess event early on, Mary makes a crack that when she eats, all the weight goes to her breasts. So, we can work on this. Now, lore-wise, altar is a term going all the way back to Fate's Day Night. I have discussed it before in our podcast, Let's Talk FGO, and in previous Wanteds. To recap briefly, there's no hard and fast rules. Sometimes servants aren't called altars despite they meet the conditions. Alcides from Strange Fake, for instance, very popular right now, doesn't want to call himself an altar despite the fact that we would probably normally call him an altar, because it seems like he's been altered. But anyway, I'm not going to tell that guy what to do. But basically, unlike an alter ego, which is a specific persona isolated and projected forward, a piece that exists inside the heroic spirit but is, isolated and personified, or various what-ifs you can run into, an altar servant has been mutated, altered natch, by some outside force to bring forward darker aspects of their character forcibly. Now, functionally, an altar is still the original heroic spirit. Many heroic spirits who can become altars possess darker instincts, impulses, etc. They have existences which make that sort of thing possible. But if they're in the same class, they would probably have roughly the same abilities. Saber Altar, for instance, doesn't have much different from regular Saber other than her personality change makes her charisma worse by a lot, and she feels much more free to fire off Excalibur Morgan, but Excalibur Morgan's not mechanically that different from regular Excalibur. But their darker aspects are focused upon sometimes as what feels like a deliberate inversion. This is seen with Camazot's Underworld Guardians in LB7. They're altars because they forcibly contradict their own spirit origins. If you don't get that, this servant's story like to Ordeal Call too, so you got some catching up to do, chat. Now, Mary Altar is similar. Normal Mary is kind of an idol-type personality. She's the perfect image of a princess and a queen. She's basically a martyr who forgives everybody. She wishes only for the best, even when being put upon by the people of France, she just wishes it would go better for them. But, if forcibly summoned in her dark aspect, she becomes the gloomy Dark Mary, an Avenger who strongly feels the resentment for her treatment by the French court, the French people, the actions especially against her children. And it's said that her motherly aspects are more pronounced in this form. Both, her tendency to mother, but also her maternal rage. Now, interesting that because of this sort of operation, Mary Altar's hidden attribute has been changed from human to earth. This is a result of the Diamond Necklace affair, which she was blamed for but was not responsible for. So that means that Mary Altar also has aspects of innocent monster incorporated into her design. This is reflected in one of her personal skills also. Continuity and fate is really weird because the Throne of Heroes exists outside of time, but I feel like Mary Altar would have been the default Marie Antoinette heroic spirit if you summoned her, before kind of the, more modern recontextualizing of her history. Whereas, obviously, I said earlier, the FGO original, the earlier Marie Antoinette in FGO is based much more on, a modern take, which is arguably more forgiving and nuanced. Honestly, sometimes it feels like too forgiving, but, heroic spirits are not literally historical people. But yeah, so normally it feels kind of like Mary Altar would be an innocent monster type character, but because we've de-innocent monstered her, she is normal and then has an altar who incorporates those elements back in. Mary Altar's primary NP is named Vae Victis, which in Latin means woe to the vanquished. It's a quote that's attributed to the Gallic chief Brennus, or Brunus, in 390, when he sacked Rome. He was the only one to manage to do it until Rome was attacked by the Visigoths at the fall. Brennus was the chief of the Senones, which were a tribe of Gallic Celts settled into areas that are in modern France, Gaul, and not too far from where Paris ended up, so, some multi-layered conceptuals here. Mary also basically has her own version of Sanson's NP as Guillotine Recanement? In-game, it's used as a skill, but she also has the power to summon instant death guillotines. Also, by the way, not necessarily related to Alter Mary specifically, but general design note, Mary has white hair in FGO because she did apparently go gray early. Supposedly, this was attributed to have the failed escape at Varennes, but we can't really confirm this, just that it was gray by the time of her death at only age 37. Anyway, after years of having a design but no event to put her in, because she wasn't ready to be a playable unit, she was a giant ghost in Fate Requiem, she is going to be a major character in the upcoming Ordeal Call 2 id, which is based around Avengers, which she is. She was already a major character in Board Game Apocalypse, and like I said, she was alluded to in Orleans and other Mary stories. Now it's time for mechanics. Now, in mechanics, Mary Alter is an Avenger who typically have pretty big attack, fairly low HP for their class. Mary is no different. She's one of several Avengers who literally has more attack than HP. And normally I say weighted more towards attack than HP. No. Her attack is bigger than her HP. Not by a lot, but it's there. She is quick, Arthur's Buster. Perfectly average hit counts, slightly below average NP gain, only 0.4. But she's an Avenger, so you know that shit don't matter. It don't matter. None of this matters. Why don't they matter? Well, number one, Mary's NP is AoE Arts. It hits the enemy with 1k curse and plus 100% evil curse, so double the curse damage, for 5 turns each. First. Then it deals damage, and minus 1 NP charge, to all enemies, and has a chance to instantly kill at the end. The overcharge effect is NP damage up for 1 first. Pretty typical for modern instant kill chance NPs. She's got a pretty decent chance at 60. Like, that means with buffs you can guarantee, 100% on, certain levels of enemies and so on. First skill is a 20 to 30% battery. It's another 10 to 20% NP per turn for 3 turns, and is also a 5 hits, 3 turns buff that when hit by an attack, she gains 10% NP. I told you not to worry. Second skill gives all enemies 3k to 5k curse damage for 3 turns. So, if they live through her NP, that means they're taking, 12k curse damage per turn for 3 turns. It's also a 20 to 30% damage up versus cursed enemies. This is why her NP does curse first. And a 20 to 30% arts up, both for 3 turns each. Final skill brings back Rider Mary's legendary tanking abilities. If you didn't know, because she's not super in demand as far as riders go, but Rider Mary is kind of infamous for her crazy good survivability skills for a launch unit. And we get a little bit of that action back in Avenger Mary. So, she has a 3/3 invul on self, that's 3 hits, 3 turns. Other party members, so not her, but everybody else, gets a 1k to 3k guts for 1 time 3 turns, and is also a 1k to 3k team-wide heal, that's Mary and everybody else. So, that's pretty good. Passives are just Avenger, for more NP gain when hit, Oblivion Correction for crit up, and Self-Replenishment for about 3% NP per turn. So, no fancy passives here, just pretty core Avenger stuff, but, like I said, it's pretty alright for what we're going for here. You should understand from what I've just said how Avenger Mary works pretty well. She's here to kill! She has solid attack, she does extra damage to enemies who are cursed, her curse can get to 12k damage on her own, so if you're fighting higher level enemies who might not be killed right away, that's a decent amount of scratch damage you do at the end. She generates NP like nobody's business when her skills are up, and she also has a hard defense. I need to kill! She even does that instant death stuff after she curses, then deals damage, so she might consign weak units to hell, right away. Now, rubs hands together, who do we pair her with? Oh, there's so many options here. Obviously, for times like these, Ashia Doman is always suspect. Mary Alter is chaotic evil, she benefits from his big attack up and crit buffs. He can also slap, 2k curse on enemies for 5 turns. He can also play defense down, that lets you set up, if you've already used Mary's, attack steroid, you can already set up to give additional curses, and if you're trying to grind down enemies, 2k curse be 2k curse. Rasputin can also give evil allies NP gauge and arts up, but his dot focus is more on firing his own NP, but he still has some team-wide synergy here. Now, Foreigner Jacques also has the ability to buff evil allies with more attack, crit, and some invuls, and also to curse enemies, but again, a lot of her focus is on her own NP to do bonus damage to cursed guys, so it's not a universal follow-through, but, depending on what sort of farming you're doing or what main story quest you're trying to clear, you can make that work out. Fellow Avengers Summer Erisei and Summer Jufu also have certain interactions with death, dots, and other such effects, but they are single target. Jufu's NP is also Buster, but Summer Eris is arts. So you could work, though, to combine them for certain matchups. If you're doing, like, high-level farming nodes where you have, like, 2 guys, 1 guy, 3 guys, or something like that, or 3 guys, 2 guys, 1 guy, or whatever, you can have Mary go first, blast the shit out of some guys, and then hopefully have your single targets follow up. If you are doing more conventional setups, as an arts focused, you can basically combine Mary with the regular crew of Tamamo, Castoria, or Lady Avalon in any sequence. There are, generic supporters you can include her in. She does have a couple of quick cards, so like I said, her pairing with Jacques is not going to, die, but it definitely gives you some options here with the arts focus. Now, for craft essences, she's only 30% normally, so you might have to employ something like Imaginary Element to get instant 100%. You might also invest in her append skills. You can use a few other supporters to get some stuff. Like I said, Rasputin gives you a little bit of NP to the team, and so on and so forth. If you're going for simple loops, you can just use Black Grail and other, high-level, pure damage CEs. But there are a couple of CEs which are uniquely placed to interact with Mary. There's a Jacques CE from the Wangina event, something about To Walk the Stars. Don't remember the exact translation. That one obviously works well on Jacques because it's basically her version of Honey Lake, the burn CE that works on Yanguife. But that also works for Mary because it's 50% starting NP and it's 25% damage versus cursed enemies. So it gives her the battery startup that you can work with, and you got some good stuff. There's a similar CE from the upcoming, what will be 2027 Halloween for us, the Liz of the End event. That's another event CE that should proc. That gives you 50% battery and 20% damage up versus both cursed and burned enemies. Otherwise, pick NP damage up, arts up, and attack up. You need to kill! I also will say, speaking of team comps though, with Bond CEs, you can do some very funny stuff. If you have a combination of Summer Eris, Jacques, and Mary, if you give all 3 of them their Bond CEs, you can give the whole team plus 55% damage versus cursed and 10% NP damage up while they're all on field. That's very funny. It's probably not great because that means nobody's getting the stat bonuses because of the Bond CE stuff, but it's very funny. And for my famous other stuff, there's not even a King Crimson transition for this. Mary is an Avenger, so that means mats only for ascensions and skills. She is going to need 10 of the new Flower of the End, which is a spider lily, by the way, to ascend, and 15 more per skill. This is a brand new mat with Ordeal Call, so you will be spending those pure prisms or doing a little bit of farming to get that done. She also does need more than a few obsidian knives, which are a bronze mat from LB7, so you might not have a lot. You might want to be considering them. And like I said, you need even more and some other bullshit for her append skills, which the preloading could work out very well for her battery. Now, Mary Alter is story-locked. She does not appear in the normal summon pool, the normal story summon banner, unless you clear Ordeal Call 2. You cannot summon her on normal limited banners. She is not in the general pool. She will have a raid-up on Ordeal Call 2's release, and as a story-locked female unit, she will have solo raid-ups at future Valentine's events, and as an Avenger, she'll get a couple of specific raid-ups during weekly and Grand Guild campaigns, but that is about it. Storylock is generally considered rarer than limited because she's not even in Lucky Bag summons normally these days. They occasionally give you special summon campaigns that have Storylock servants in them, but it's not like a guarantee. And that is about that. So, everybody have fun with Ordeal Call 2, happening soon. Mary's going to be the Student Council President. Have fun with that one. We'll see you for Let's Like FGO later this week. We'll talk about White Day in JP, and also a little bit about the Ordeal Call. Probably not far, but, we'll be taking notes and stuff. And if you need a briefing on Ordeal Call 2, check out last week's episode of Let's Like FGO, our weekly podcast about FGO, and other things. And stay tuned for more Wanteds later. Anyway, I'm now experiencing critical marathon withdrawal, so I have to, go engage in altered thermodynamics. Ciao, everybody. If you're watching this video on YouTube, give us a like, consider commenting and subscribing. You can join our Discord, link in the description. You can also consider joining the channel memberships, along with ringing the bell for notifications, and consider supporting us on Patreon. Could have gotten this episode early, and could have gotten other stuff, and we'll have more about our patrons after my musical outro. And before we go, I'd like to shout out all of our patrons, but especially our top-ranking ones: Adam DeHart, Blackest OG, Call Me Zed, Carlos, Dragon, JD1000, Rise of Kenji, Rogue Robin, and Sharvor. If you like what we do and want to see us do more, consider supporting us on Patreon. Thanks, everybody.